All right, hello and welcome. So I invited a special guest for this podcast, and we will be talking about a debate topic, which is this house opposes the commercialization of competitive debating. So we will be not debating this topic. We're just going to be talking about the context and different ideas that we could talk about as debate coaches. So Daryl, I'd like to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself.
Oh, cool. So my name is Daryl. I've been in debating itself for 17 years now. This is the 17th year I've done it.
Wow.
Been here a while. I started out like everybody else, training under one of the Philippines' debate education programs. So it was in 2009, I think, or maybe earlier, where I met the guys at Ateneo in the university where they were doing an Australs workshop. That was when I was 10 years old. So it's it's a long time. Since then, I did my competitive debating stint, did the world championship, did the ad scores of a couple of majors, and then instead of going into work life, like the rest of my friends who went into Unilever or like management trainee programs at banks, I decided to keep doing this education thing in debate. So I moved to China in 2015, and I've been here since then. Yeah, that's my journey of it, like a snapshot. What did your journey look like, Bolo, from the start?
Um, I started out in college. Just wanted to, um, I just wanted to like prove to like my family that I wasn't stupid, because like I was one of the few people who couldn't like pass the elite colleges in the Philippines. So that was my way of like just showing that I could like stand toe to toe with like the best thinkers of the Philippines. And then after that, when I got over my pettiness, I just really realized that this is really awesome for altering my perspectives in life and in terms of like seeing things in a more compassionate lens, and a broader perspective. And that's why like I started coaching in my second year of college when I was just entertaining the newbies who entered our organization. That's why now I'm just super passionate about it, because we get to change our minds and change people's minds, and have a broader perspective where we could be more understanding with people we disagree with. So that's pretty much me. Actually, Daryl, ever since I started debating, your impression of me is that you're one of the most decorated debaters in the country during the time you were competing in college. Would you like to share a couple of your debate credentials?
Okay, sure. So, in my first attendance to a major tournament was actually like the ABP in Thailand. I forgot when. It was the first ABP ever, and I was there with DLSU. Like I was like judging for DLSU then. It was great. It was my first time doing the BP circuit at the university level. So that was a great experience. But I did break at that event, just like to shatter the entire notion that, oh, right, like success stories have to start with the first big break of the first year. Not really, right? Like it's a journey. Eventually, I went to Australs as a 17-year-old for Ateneo, and I broke as a first year. There are only a couple of Filipinos who did that, and I broke every year I attended at Austral since then. Um, I was chief adjudicator of Asians at ABP in 2013, and the last major that I scored was Australs in 2015 in Korea. Since then, I'm back and forth. But I wanted to go back to what you were discussing just
Sure.
now, because that
Yeah.
was that was really interesting. What does it mean when a Filipino family, when they hear their kid is a debater, changes their impression of how intelligent they are? Like, what is that? Like, what is that? I don't know, because my experience with it was quite the opposite. Like, my family is very Filipino. Values
Hmm.
are there. Christian, very godly, goes to church all the time. And they said that it was a big waste of time to debate, like going to
Hmm.
debate, taking away time from your grades, and was spending hundreds of
Yeah.
dollars for things that they don't really see. Economically, I'd like to think that I made the right decisions for my career, but I always been of the impression that I was disappointing someone in my family,
Hmm.
basically. Like I'm not at school as much as I should be. How is that different for you? Did they like it? Did they like the fact that you were a debater at home?
Yeah, so it's very common within the debate community in the Philippines saying that like debating wouldn't get you anywhere. It's just like intellectual masturbation, as they call it. And yeah, but I really do think that um, the the tipping point in which I got to change the perspectives of family members where I see that this is a good thing is when like I got to like change my perspectives about like gay people. Like I thought it shouldn't be because like I was born in a conservative family. And then when I could just really defend principles of why we could be more compassionate, we could be inclusive with how we treat people in the government or like in the family. That's where like I've felt that I gotten respect because when people will disagree with you about conservative things and non-conservative things, um, that's when like people could just really understand and respect that you could defend viewpoints in a provocative and respectful way. And I think that people get to recognize around you that that's a skill in real life about sharing perspectives and convincing people. That's a skill that like we have to use every day. And right now, I see it useful with convincing people to take workshops, working with government to teach public school teachers how to teach their own students debate and public speaking. And that's just where I felt that I've been making a difference. And that's where I felt that people also recognize that it's important that people get to learn how to express themselves, especially on social issues that are very controversial.
I think that's really lucky, ma'am.
How
With a
about for
lot of
you?
experience, the interaction between Filipino culture and debating hasn't been the best, right? So with like older members of my family, who were a little more conservative, have firmer set beliefs. It's not just the anti-gay, binary opposites, women should clean at the house kinds of thing. It's also the age thing where talking to your elders and disagreeing with them is in itself wrong without actually looking at your position on the matter. It doesn't matter what you're saying. What matters is you need to take that side. I can't bridge that.
Mhm.
That's impacted my relationships with family members. It's just alien to them. That didn't happen to you.
Oh, now that you're talking about it, yeah, it still happens until now. I think that I consistently challenge the Filipino culture that we shouldn't talk to elders about certain topics, or just like when we disagree on normal like daily life things. It is a struggle, and I just think that there are ways to challenge things respectfully. And there are many times where my conversations with my parents have gotten out of hand. And one thing that I have realized is that if I can defend something to a great extent, I also have the ability to reconcile using my communication. And that's something that is still a challenge for me. Um, and that's what I tend to reflect towards my students that I coach in debate, where they have to question my authority consistently because like I'm not the expert of everything. And that's where I tried my best to honor my perspective that younger people should be able to challenge older people's perspectives. So yeah, I
It
you relate
sounds
with.
like a really free, creative place. Like that sounds good. My mind right now is on if that happened with us in debating and in our families. What do you think would happen to the same politically involved person in a Filipino family where they never had that critical thinking element, so they just grew up with it? Because you know, in 2010, 2009, I was working for one of the political parties in the Philippines, Lakas CMD. So that was Gloria Arroyo's party. I was one of their spokespersons for the campaign for the youth segment trying to get votes when Teodoro was running against Aquino, and a lot of the people who were on my team, my campaign, we're voting for Teodoro for Gibo because he was the slogan was Galing at Talino, right? Like it was always a
Mm,
very academic, cerebral platform. This guy was a defense secretary for the Philippines, great grades, Harvard lawyer. So like all of those things, right? And that's sold to that group of people. Almost the entire group, right, voted for Duterte. The entire group that was like supporting an academic is now supporting like someone who's the complete opposite of it in campaign and messaging and everything. I'm just
mm,
wondering, like, what is the similarity between them that would drive this core group of people to vote in that direction? I don't get it. It might
mm,
be this authority deference thing, like,
mm.
but I'm not sure. What do you think?
My perspective on it is there's nothing that has to do with a similarity, but it's about times change, and like people also change their minds depending on the context of the current situation. So I think it's like people have been talking about the banner of like be smart, be it's good if you're a lawyer, it's good if you're well educated. And then I just think people in our country just was so fed up with that because that formula wasn't working anymore. And people change their minds. And in my perspective, would just say, all right, let's try something different. Aside from like an intellectual from Imperial Manila, let's try someone who has like guts and balls from Mindanao, and maybe that will work. So I think one of those sentiments is that, and the minds of people just change depending in areas
Kind
where they're disgruntled.
Hegel's dialectic, right? Like there's a thesis, antithesis, and you get the synthesis. Like,
Yeah,
at some point, the antithesis will destroy the world, though. Like it can't go nuts.
yeah.
um,
But when you talked about like people who are in political families, and like I really important that the younger generation of like our future leaders from the political dynasties could it would be beneficial to our country if they get access to debate, or they do debate, because like in debate you get to question the structures that you benefit from. And essentially like the main topic of this podcast really is also about the structures that we benefit from, because like we coach debate professionally, and we're also talking about a topic where if we oppose the commercial, just like the same system that we benefit, um, ideas will come up in terms of then how do we move in terms of making it better for everyone. So that's why I think it's really important for future leaders of our country, regardless if
yeah.
they be from a political family or not, just to question the structures we benefit from is
let's
beneficial.
get into the meat of that topic then. And like before the topic itself, let's talk about access, right? Like, what is the access problem in the Philippines? The reason you have this topic here is
Mm,
you've seen the access problem. What is it? Because I haven't been there in a while. Like to give you my background, right? Like, I was debate education officer at Ateneo Debate Society for a year, and when I was there, it was mostly China focused. So I would be on behalf of them and on approval from both funding and for leave, taking weekends or weeks in China where I would do outreach to universities and schools that wanted to learn about BP or to
mm,
get mentorship on how to manage their clubs, or like specialized training if they
mm,
already know how to debate, and just getting ready to break it, like world's EFL category if that was their objective, or ESL category, because back then like it was really hard for people to aim for the open category. It's a different monster now. China's evolved a lot, but basically, right, like that was what debate education looked like. I didn't get to do as much of that in the Philippines. And so I don't really know what is the access issue. It's in China, it's just talent is not there. So they need to fly it in. At least that was how it was. What is the, I think the Philippines has great debating educators, right? So it's not a talent deficit. But what is it?
yeah. I think the access issue for me is about students getting to participate in global formats like Asian parliamentary and British parliamentary public school system. So like in the private school system, like like we're around 200 institutions that compete in British parliamentary and Asian parliamentary. So the public school system, like they don't have access to these global formats like British parliamentary. Like the world's WUDC is like the Olympics of debating, and we just don't have that. We don't have that tournaments in public schools. We don't have
Why
coaches
not?
teach in public schools. I actually like. I'm really intrigued. Why not? And I think like the debate community has yet to like introduce it to the government, the public school system, like as a regular thing. Like if you treat basketball as important, then like you could also treat like debate like as a legitimate sport as well, where students can thrive in and express their own thoughts and greatness. So I just think like people like us would have to like talk to our public school, like our local governments. That could be a start. So I think that's one of the like access problems we have in the Philippines. But when we talk about like even private schools, debate is not given as much importance compared to like football or basketball or even baseball. You know what I mean? Like I don't see universities sponsoring their students in terms of like I don't know clothes or like better facilities and stuff. At least if we compare it towards the extent of like UAAP sports. So that's why many students can't go to different tournaments all around the world or even in the country because like the funding is low and students have to raise their own money instead of their universities giving them more money. So that's my perspective in terms of access and where it's lacking.
There are two chunks of that. My university experience is a little different. I going to Ateneo just compared to how much I had to pay in fees to the university for my college education, and what I got back in terms of the income I made from doing part-time debate coaching as a university student, and the flights and sponsorship that Ateneo gave me for all of my debating tournaments on behalf of the school. It's like it's like I got almost every dollar I paid to the university back. It's like I didn't pay for school, just getting that value back. I think that's because of the
Mhm.
endowment that the PLDT used to give at the Ateneo Debating Society was very generous. So I don't think that was just predicated on the success of the club, right? It's not just because it was an award-winning club then. I think
Mhm.
that the members of the club were really motivated to pitch the case to
Mhm.
anyone and everyone and like look for ways to raise funds, make sure that they have the PSDC is like this outlet so that they make income. I think that it's a drive. Like if we accept that there's no way to make money, then no business is going to thrive in the Philippines, right? Like there
Right.
has entrepreneurial spirit. But on the other thing about public schools, it's a but why situation. But why, right? Like Singapore, for example, requires all of its students in the school system to learn debating, and it's the same
Mhm.
debating that we do. They might not do it very well, and they might stop doing it after the required test, right? But they all have to go through that system.
Mhm.
Could it be because public school teachers have to be licensed, and therefore the kind of person that makes it through the educational licensing system to get to become a licensed teacher, like that person isn't cut out for teaching debating? Is there a disconnect between an educator taught at like Philippine Normal University or somewhere where they create teachers and a person who could teach debating? Is that a Philippine pedagogical problem?
I'm not entirely sure. So like I taught in Southern Luzon, Southern Leyte, debate, and it's just not one of the priorities. And it's fair, right? Like people need to learn their math, people need to learn, like students need to learn like English first and stuff. So I just really think it's about like normal people like us taking initiative towards it. I think many debate material to teach and coach is just like all for free on the internet. I guess the culture that we make around it is something that has yet to be nurtured and
I
created.
have a controversial theory about this.
Mhm.
One of
Yeah.
my theories I think about this a lot. I care about the country a lot. I care about the public educational system. I care about making sure people have a way to access the lives that we have had. Like both in terms of the important, right? The obvious thing is the material. Like a critical thinker has a better access to any career path they'd go to. Also, just
Yeah.
just the moral and intellectual side of it, just getting firmer judgment. My theory is the debating community was always at odds with the government, right? Whether it's
Mm,
in the Aquino period or with the president that we get along with, it's a corruption matter, right? Or when it's a president like Estrada or Duterte, it's blankly a matter of people disagree with the person or the
mm.
philosophy behind leadership. But there's always a reason to have that disconnection. Is there anyone in the debating community right now working in the government?
I think we have a couple, or a lot. I'm just not sure. And I don't know. I think like many people after they graduate from college, I mean, it's not their main priority now to forward debate.
Active community members, right? Like people who still are reaching out to people. Are any of them actually on this side of the government right now?
That's
Because you
something
look
that
at
I'm not sure.
you
I'm not sure about it.
look at Singapore, there's always the involvement of these, like young debaters in government in some capacity.
Mhm.
If everyone in the country is just like always on an oppositional area, is there anyone who can affect internal change, right?
Yeah, I'm just not entirely sure about that. Uh, yeah, I'm not entirely sure about that.
I remember, right, a very prominent, we're not going to name drop his name, but a very prominent debater in the Philippines was almost Duterte's spokesperson, right?
Yeah, almost, or like assistant spokesperson.
To be fair, right, like when that news came out, I reacted to it emotionally, right? Like in like that's I wrote some material about how this is unacceptable on a moral level. Like how can we continue to recognize this person as a member of our society when they want to like legitimize a murderer, right? Like
Right.
or like people like thinking back, maybe they were onto something here, right? Like maybe they were onto something in the sense that, okay, look, the Philippine left has failed to get votes. Elections are not looking good for the next 20 years. Why not just find a way to make small tweaks, right? Like the people sabotaging Trump in the US, right? Like maybe he was onto something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's the classic debate of like trying to change the system from within or try to change the system from the periphery. So I guess, but for me, I think like a good way to start is with local governments. Um, so I think we have debaters who work with local governments who can like start small with like the public schools in this particular municipality. So that's accessible. Um, it's just that like I don't know. So for me, like sometimes I get just too jaded when I hear the government, is because like sometimes I feel that if you have a
That's part of
project.
the a
Mhm.
little open to working with the establishment.
Yeah, so like one of my reservations to work with the government is that okay, there's gonna be a project and we'll need funds, but like perhaps a percentage of these projects would be pocketed by certain people, and I just don't want to be complicit or like
Yeah.
just part of that process. So that I'm just generalizing, saying that I have experience and I know these things. Um, I think that's where it also comes from. Like many debaters like us, like are just jaded because of how we operate as a country. So yeah, that's that's pretty much it.
But
But
since you bring it up now, and like we've gone on a tangent here, let's try to get
sure,
back to the form, right? Let's talk about money itself. Let's talk about business. The topic, right? Like, so would the
yeah.
audience be see the topic while we're talking?
Oh,
So
I'm
they have
just like post it like on the like when it's posted. Like I'll just
basically like so what I want to hear from you now is so
yeah.
while there's the topic, like what is this? Like what are you imagining this debate to be about?
Yeah. So for me, like the commercialization of competitive debating can come in like so many different forms, right? So like in the info slide when this motion was released in one of the most recent online tournaments, the
Topic.
examples are like profit debate training, like what I do. Um, paid workshops like what I do, paying IA salary, so like what people in who organize tournaments do, or paying pros to speak with wealthy beginners. So I think it's just like a broad um, uh, context in terms of commercialized competitive debating. So sorry, what was the question? I forgot. Like I went off tangent.
This came out in an actual tournament. Which one?
Um, I have to check. I have to check. But it came out on a grand final. And I
A
think
grand
our recording was also available. I just haven't watched it.
Philippines tournament or a
No, no,
tournament
no.
outside?
It's outside. It's like it's an international tournament. So I think like if I'm not mistaken, it's like Parasat IV. I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing that correct in particular. But in terms of like just thinking about it, right? Because like we were talking about like questioning the systems that we benefit from. Like I was just like really wondering like if I were to defend this topic like as in government or affirmative side of opposing the commercialization of competitive debating, like what would I say? And one of the things that I came up with, this has been a lingering thought in my mind ever since I started um, coaching debate for international school students, is that I benefit from a structure where parents are obsessed with with their children winning, doing well, getting medals, and sometimes the process of getting there is insanely tough. Like I need to tell my students to read like so many different things, and then I need them to train every day. I need them to develop habits, and sometimes it's not what they want, but it's what the parents want, and I'm incentivized to push them to be the greatest debaters that they can be, so that if they do well, I get like word of mouth like advertising, and I'd have more like students, and I get to do the the coaching that I love to do. So I just think there's an incentive structure within the parents, within me, and within the student, where because of the money that I get and the payment and like just more students and like getting to develop my programs even further, um, I recognize that there are students who just don't like this, and they're just pressured by their parents, and that's where I feel that and I ask myself the question, am I prioritizing the profit? Am I prioritizing the business model? Or am I prioritizing the well-being of the students? And as a teacher and debate coach, like obviously the latter should be the priority. And that's where like I struggle with finding that balance, because I want them to do well. And there are things that are really tough where they have to train, they have to read a lot of things, and I'm just looking for the balance of fulfillment and doing really well. So just like one thing that I want to say, it's like Michael Jordan, when just like the last episode of The Last Dance was like aired today, released today, Michael Jordan like had to talk to his teammates where they just didn't want to be around him, but that's what it took for them to get pushed to be on a different level. And sometimes that's my mindset, like if you want to be a champion, you got to do the things that you don't want to do, so you can do the things that you want to do in the future. But I don't want to be like Michael Jordan, where like my teammates hate me just so I could get like shiny things around my neck and shiny things that I could like show people on social media. So that's like one of the first things that came into my mind, if I were to oppose the structure that I benefit from, is that like I stress out many students, because parents tell me that they want their students to do insanely well and perform high, and that's where I struggle in terms of the balance of high performance and well-being and student well-being. So yeah. And how about for you? I don't know. So how do we go about this? Would you also want to talk about like what would you be talking about if you were affirmative for this topic, or like would you want to go straight to if you were opposition, would you be launching?
That's valuable to stay on the AF because that's completely not where I would bring the case from an AF,
Mhm.
because you'd be rebutted from the op leader immediately, and they'd say, "This will happen with any activity. You don't
Mhm.
sell in debating. Parents are going to do this with something else, and it might
Yeah,
not be
like
as so
basketball, quiz bees.
model UN, right? Like,
Got it.
like
Yeah, yeah,
activities.
right.
It feels good to bring out argument, and it's a good introspection as well to your own moral compass, Bolo. But like,
Yeah.
as my
How about for
app would
you?
not run.
Hmm.
Yeah, if I were just trying to win the debate, right, I think the most toxic part of the commercialization of the activity would be the feedback loop and how standards go down. Because if the incentives are to make money, and you want to make as much money as possible, then all of your analysis about them becoming good and that satisfies the parent, therefore they go in the cycle, means instead of me working hard to be a better coach and making them better debaters, I could hijack the competition model so that no matter what happens, they win something. And then the feedback becomes an echo. And then other people believe in the same thing. They get in the same hamster wheel where they're not winning Australs, they're not winning Asians, they're not winning worlds. They're winning, like small, like tournaments that aren't even BP anymore, like that you could memorize speeches for, and then tell yourself that you're a debater, right? Like I think that's the bigger F, in the sense that you lose intellectual rigor, you lose the critical thinking, you create, if the value of it is college, for example, and they get to college, either they squeeze through the cracks because they think that they are like a top world school debater, but they get there and then they don't have the skills, so they end up not having that personality, not having that can do attitude, so they end up failing college, or not fitting in. Or what I think is happening now, right, in the industry, colleges are catching on. Colleges
Hmm.
are learning that a lot of these debate tournaments are useless, and it hurts everyone else who's actually, like in the game to contribute something to a top club like Yale or Harvard, right? Like eventually, like it hurts all debaters when the stereotype is, oh, it's an English language public speaking, I memorized something like contest. I think I would gov it somewhere in that direction. Like
I see.
commercialization is like that. What do you
I
think?
see. Sorry. Is it like because there's so many profit incentives that people are discovering now that they can release a bunch of tournaments where whatever like credentials you get from those tournaments wouldn't mean
Yeah,
anything at all? I see.
I,
Got it. Yeah,
I think that's, yeah.
yeah. I think like I could observe that where there are tournaments where they give out like 600 medals to like a bunch like a lot of students. I'm just not gonna name tournaments. But yeah, people are just there to like get a medal and a stuffed toy and stuff.
I met the guy who runs that event, and they recently started a Philippines like chapter of it. What do they call it?
I don't know.
Like
I don't want to name drop it. Like it's like
I met the guy, and like we're not gonna name it because you get sued. But
yeah.
basically, right, like profit model company. It's registered as an NGO in the United States. At every regional round they host, and there's almost 111 of them. Those
Mhm.
are all profit like collections of fees. Now, if they can claim to be an NGO and they have that in with an international school because of the US license, they don't really need to declare that they're making money in Thailand or in the Philippines or
Yeah.
in, I know, right? So like that's what I mean. That's commercialization, right? I hope we can get to a point, because my heart is in the op of this case, right? Like I hope we get
Right.
to a point where we have that scale without the quality drop, and we're not going to give 600 medals away because it's okay to lose, right? Like I want to nurture that belief that you should cherish your losses, especially if they
Mhm.
were hard fought losses and they were high quality losses. But like, yeah, like I think that that's what's happening, and it's pretty crappy.
Got it. Another like I don't know, an idea that I'd launch, I guess, uh, is about like people aren't fostering the sense of community because if I don't get into the semifinal or a grand final as a debater or a judge, that means like I'm not gonna be invited to this tournament like in Europe or in China where they'd pay me as a subsidized adjudicator and I'd get more money. And that's where, especially when I was like in my last years of of competitive debating in college, I was like, it's all about the result, and I don't care about my teammates anymore. I'm gonna do my best, and I'm gonna do whatever it takes to do really well. So in the future, I'm going to different countries and earn money as a subsidized judge, or be invited as an adjudicator and get free flights and all these things. And that's where like I was not willing to teach my like other people from the Philippine debate community like new skills or new frameworks, because I know they're gonna go up against me, and they might know like how I think and use that against me. And I just felt that it was a like I built toxic relationships because I knew that if I did well, new opportunities for me to go around the world and earn money would be there. So that's one thing also that I'd launch as my experience as a debater in varsity during university.
It really hurts me to hear that, man. Right? Like it's like I think firstly, if people up to now watching this and listening to this think that the only way you're going to get work out of debating is if you're a jerk to everyone else and win a bunch of speaker prizes and like win tournaments, like that's not how this business rolls. In fact, reliability, your ability to wake up early for the job, to show
Mm.
up on time, to not, like miss out on paperwork, like that is potentially 60% of it. And your CV is great and you need to meet the requirement, but there's more than the job to coach the A team of a club,
Yeah.
right? There are so many debaters on the ladder. I can only use like so many Australs, Worlds, Euros champions. I don't need all of those, right? It's a business thing. It's sad to hear that did that really happen? So in the Philippines, like people
I
would
mean,
try to
I'm
not
just speaking
nurture.
for myself. I'm just speaking for myself. I mean, I like it takes something to acknowledge that. And that's what I learned really late. What you were talking about like it doesn't really like credentials is just like a percentage of it, but it's not the bulk. Because when I started like debating and running workshops, I started running workshops, and I got to work with the National Commission of Culture and the Arts and DepEd. It wasn't because of my credentials. It was because they knew like I was teaching debate here and there for free. Like out of my own pocket, I'd go to a different province and add score there and give talks there. Um, so that's what I discovered lately. Actually, so I run like workshops, like summer workshops and winter workshops for Koreans who fly over to the Philippines, and it actually started because I was giving lessons for free, and they said, okay, if we want this to be consistent, and I told them if for it to be consistent, and if you want me to give like so much focus on it, here is my offer. This is what would make it sustainable, and they agreed, and that's where I started like this education company, and I got people to work with me because out of me doing what I love and me just like providing value to them. So that's when I learned really late, like after college, that that's where I can get my success from. So, but I'm sure that the commercialization aspect of it, when I was way younger, I thought like people valued the brand of being a champion at something or at a tournament.
I'd hesitate to say that that's inherent to commercialization. I think
Mm.
that's inherent to the culture of university debating in the Philippines. Like coming up, coming out of the high school circuit into the university one, I had lots of friends who were, I was an idea kid. Is idea still around? Idea still around, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is around.
Ideas as an idea kid, and like a lot of my seniors went to different universities, and back in school at high school we would all talk to each other, we're all friends. But like coming to university, they were saying, it's really different here, Daryl. Like we might not be able to talk to each other anymore because contingents don't really talk to each other. Like there's no mingling, there's a lot of tension, especially when alumni are watching. Like you're not
Mm.
supposed to appear like you're friends with certain people. I think that, like, I'm not sure what happened with you guys, but that was the biggest factor for like not nurturing each other as an ecosystem when I was in university.
Mm.
It's like it was always, and like in my head, I hope that that's changed, and I think that it has changed a lot. Observing how people
Mm-hmm.
behave now, and people treat each other now, but back in the day, I think like it was really clear that like an old guard Ateneo like alumni or like the older seniors would just like completely not accept the
Mm,
possibility of a UPD win at a tournament, right? Like
yeah.
it's you have or not you're disowned from the club, all right? Like
Mm,
you or how do tryouts work
yeah.
when you a debater?
I actually get your point. Like so, like the argument that or the idea that I wanted to launch could be responded to by saying that that type of toxicity can still happen with with non-commercialization, and that actually exists before when like it was less commercialized. So yeah, I really do get that point in terms of
The money does make
that argument.
sense. Like when at the peak of my freelancing, like because like the stages of my career in debating in terms of just making money was I was freelancing, then I moved to China where I did sales for a company. I wasn't a debate coach, I was working in a sales department like selling education product related to debating, and then I started debate coaching again except for a Hong Kong firm. The interesting part when I was a freelancer was I was in direct competition with other Filipino debate educators, or I guess with one other Filipino debate educator. And because at that time, the Malaysians weren't as active and the Singaporeans weren't as active, the people in East Asia were either just going to hire that person or me. And it was pretty weird like system where you had your professional network, and if they prefer you, they wouldn't be hiring the other person and vice versa. So
Mhm.
yeah, it still works, but you got to nuance it to the fact that money creates incentives for you to block, right? Like
Mm,
opportunities scaling, and it cascades. So that means that I would promote like people who I knew were within my sphere of either sphere of competitiveness because they were from the same club, or even
mhm,
if they weren't from Ateneo, like they were from other clubs, but I just knew that like we play nicely and I could trust these people, right?
mhm,
So like it creates these clicks things. You could still run the argument, it's just that
mhm.
it has to like vested interest, and
Right,
not just I want rich, but I want to scale up. And if I know
right.
I could put this guy from this school in here and they would keep my interests, right? Like it's like planting seeds or something. Like
Yeah,
that is a possible thing you could run.
yeah. Like I think the money as a key concept has to be characterized on how that shapes like incentive structures. I think for that argument to fly, what would you say if you were up?
I think the most like putting myself away first and my own biases of it. I
Mm-hmm.
think the most strategic argument really has to be the labor involved, and it's just like a recognition of labor argument that commercialization has allowed for a lot of debaters who would otherwise not be paid, rewarded for their hard work, for their dedication, to get paid. A lot of the people who say that you shouldn't be paid for debating came from, a big position of privilege. They're already from rich families. They do this as a hobby, and that's fine. But not everyone comes from this background. A lot of people, want to do this, enjoy doing this, but need to be paid in order to continue doing this, right? It's not just a matter of, oh, I'll just tell dad I'm not going to show up at the company that we own, right? Like it's not everyone's from that kind of family. So I think that if you are a good debater and you're a good coach and you provide services, and we replace the word debating with football or
Mm-hmm.
ballet or any other activity, we wouldn't treat it the same manner.
Mm-hmm.
But the harm is you allow people to be taken advantage of by a collective that is only preserving that norm because it was started by elites, right? It
Mm-hmm.
started from Oxford, it started from top universities, and like they don't need the money, but other people do need it to continue doing the activity. So, in fact, you could extend that into saying that it's a gatekeeping of privilege to assert, oh, we don't want you to make money from it, so I'm going to let you die, and I'm going to let your career finish with you having no sustainable way to continue this, so that the people who will continue it or the people who will stay around and become dinosaurs are just the people who can afford it because they're already rich. Part, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm a BP debater, right? Like the extension to that is a privileged gatekeeping. So let's say two people, right? They finish university at the same time. One of them has the money to not have to do a day job as seriously or maybe at all, right? They could just live off of what property they rent out or a company that their family owns, and they want to continue writing and debating and judging. That's accessible for them. An
Mhm.
individual who that family background who wants to do all of that has to trade that off with making an income and providing for their family, when in all fairness, if they were great, right? If they were good at the job and they were good at debate coaching, they could
Yeah.
potentially be simply in the business, growing this out and enjoying their life, right?
Mhm.
Like why can't we create a path for Kobe's or for like Steph Curry's to come out of debating, right? Like it's just we've divorced it because of the history when it deserves, it deserves a chance. I think
Mhm.
it deserves a chance to scale up that direction.
Yeah. I think that is like, yeah, I totally agree with that. I would also like coming from where you were ending in terms of if we want more people to access debate, then and if there's more like money surrounding the people who promote debate, then that's where like people can also have like corporate social responsibility programs where like there are some companies who I'm just not going to name companies like who just share their lesson plans just for free and it's easily accessible in just like 2 clicks. Or in terms of like me, I get to coach for free for different debate organizations because I know that that can be used as my own training so that when I forward my own debate programs to clients from international schools, then like I'd be better. So like I have a natural incentive to keep on coaching all for free as long as I get better as well. But if I also like become successful in terms of my profit margins, that allows me to create like a corporate social responsibility program where I could like introduce this format to like different provinces that don't have access to this debate format. So I'd run the extension of like a corporate social responsibility thing, and that's where the access gets faster. Uh,
Okay.
but actually, when you were talking about Kobe's or like Steph Curry's, like I was also thinking about like how how do we want to treat competitive debating? Do we want to treat it something that is exclusive to the academe, or is it something that we want to treat like a sport, right? Because if we, right, because
So I'm
mhm.
go ahead. Were you
No, because like if we treat it like a sport, like just like in the best case scenario that like there's a lot of audience for competitive debating, that means that there would be like people like us who could be like debating and then like uh just like get
gonna?
fan base out of it like in the future, like if that's the best case, right? If it's treated like a sport and that we can have the equivalent to like NBA cares where we donate more stuff and like provide like NBA education of basketball and all that stuff and like what LeBron is doing. I'm just like seeing it in best case scenario. How do you want to?
That's
Is it something that like belongs to the academy, or should it be like a sport that could be part of the culture in the future? But that's like an
that's
fairy argument for me. Yeah.
it's not an airy fairy thing. That's exactly what I'm working on, and the
Mm.
infrastructure for that in debating already exists. People want to attend universities like Yale, Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, and they all have debate clubs. There's an underlying infrastructure where you already have merchandise that's been plotted on how often it sells sweatshirts and mugs, and you have people who know the academic capstone of those organizations is their debating society, right?
Mm.
Like it flying stuff already exists. Funny that you should say is it an academic or sports discussion, because I
Mm.
think that there a podcast last weekend that's saying the opposite view, which is that it should be academic. I completely
Mm.
disagree. I think that it should turn into sports. I think that the future of debating, in order for this to become like the model that swim coaches do. Because in the Philippines, you have so many people teaching swimming or football, and they're not part of some big organization. Most of them never went to the Olympics, but they're just good at what they do. It's because there's
Yeah.
a natural organic demand for the kuya that can teach you how to swim, right? And
Yeah.
that's because no matter where you're from, no matter what school you're in, if you're recognized as a good swimmer, and you enjoy it, either, you do it as an amateur, you win your local meet, or one day you play for Team Pilipinas, right?
Yeah.
So having a model that's democratized all the way that direction is going to make it so that anyone, any Daryl, any Bolo, in a barangay in the Philippines can go to the barangay hall, have a classroom or seminar room, and that has a ladder effect into one day
Mhm.
debate for your country. But it needs to be democratized. What that
Yeah.
means is you have like the structure evolves into ESPN. No more
Yeah.
World University Debating Championship, no more World Schools Debating Championship. It's just like a creation of a set of rules so that you can score points, a way for judges to access any tournament in the world. And with digital judges, it's now possible, right? Because you have adjudicators online.
Yeah.
And eventually, like, but you could debate. So you'll still have a national team, you still have an Olympics, but you can have an Australian Open, you can have Wimbledon, you can have like tournaments like with clubs, the esports model of Dota 2, right? Like
Yeah.
that created too. I think
It,
it's very it's happening. I give
right.
it 5
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. What do you call this? And the way I'd like impact that out with an example is like the ABS-CBN news channel. They have a show called Square Off, where like college debaters who go into law school would debate on national television about social issues. I think the positive impact of that is because now it's competitive. It's like different brands of different schools are competing. There's like traction about it, but also traction with the social issue that we need to talk about, whether it's about like tariffs, whether it's about like holding some officials to account or changing government structures. So I think because there's a commercialization aspect of it, like ANC, ABS-CBN News Channel earns from the ads that it gets. They have a natural incentive to invite debaters and law school students to talk about these issues. And I just think that people in society gets more involved with being in the know about what empowers them as a citizen. So that's how I'd like layer that example and impact.
Did
Um,
you know Square Off used to have a direct relationship with UADC?
I did not know that. I
Yeah.
didn't know that. Like, and to what
Like
extent?
at national like qualifier regionally, so not all the Metro Manila schools could get spots because there's a concentration. But basically, like there's an octos all the way to a final, and if you won, you got free free flights to wherever UADC was that year. And so like it used to be actually ours. They moved it to the law debate section because the law firms wanted to sponsor something to directly let them see potential in people graduating. Well, not always, because not all their debaters were graduating students. But yeah, like basically to see the potential for possible hires. But
Yeah. Now
TV,
I'm actually super curious because like I really like with my biases aside, like I really find it like as a I don't know. I don't think it's a winning argument, but I really like that argument in terms of, yeah, let's treat it like a sport. And like if we were like closing government in this debate, like how would we respond to that? Like it's nice to treat it like a sport instead of like an academic thing. As G, like how would you take? What would be your take on it?
like now it's not democratized, but a certain group of people can control a selection for 5 debaters to represent millions of people in the country and then tell everyone else who didn't make that selection that they should stop debating the high school level, try again in college, right? So it's already, there's no sport, right? But already you have like methodologies for corruption available. I don't think it is corrupt in the Philippines, but I've seen how this could become a money-making venture in different countries just because they have that gatekeeping control, right? So how does that worsen under a democratized sporting system? Basically, you could create bad forms of debating, just like what we talked about earlier. And if you win those, you create a feedback loop. and then you eventually you try to create disinformation to tell others that the proper debating tournaments where you could win are less valuable and less
Mhm.
contributory to your future, like prospects in college or critical thinking. So it can get toxic.
Yeah,
Yeah, like it's not a silver bullet argument, right? Like
got it.
especially a lot of money is involved and power is involved. It could be very corrupt.
Yeah. What do you call this? My take on it is that it's gonna be hard to treat it like a sport because, like, compared to basketball, it's like it's really just like number of hoops that go into the ring, number of balls that go into the hoop. Like you'd win, and that's the score. But in terms
Mm-hmm.
of like judging, like we really can't say like who really won that thing. And there's like a lot of arbitrary aspects that we consider as well. And um and I think the judging part of it and like discussing who won and stuff like that, those are the things that tend to be boring and nobody really wants to listen to. Sometimes like just for me, I just want to know the freaking result. If my team or like my guy won the that particular debate. But also it's like the impact of if one person or like one team or one side wins that debate, is that something that society would also view as correct or something that would we'd be celebrating? So like for example, like Michael Jordan celebrated all around the world because he can shoot hoops, right? And that's just like that's just that. But in terms of like someone who would win a debate about a contentious issue, is that something that people would already believe? And like, is that healthy that we give credit to the argument because they won that particular round based on the number of votes judges have? And just one thing that I wanted to point out, and I'm not gonna name any names, but there was one tournament that is released on media. I'm not gonna say whatever media, where my team and I had to say that the motion that was they were asking us to debate is something that is dangerous and we're not willing to defend, and it's not a balanced like debate. So
Uh-oh. Okay.
and that's why we gave like position papers saying that this is not a balanced debate, this is not a healthy debate, can you please change it to this topic? And the thing is, so it was good that our team was courageous enough to point that out, that that's not a healthy discussion for our society. Um, and then yeah, so that didn't push through, and what we proposed pushed through. um, we ended up losing that debate, which is what was all fine, at least was a healthy discussion. But that's where when you talked about like power structures, like yeah, that could be a real thing where we get to use the best minds of the people, where it's like um there's a huge media reach, and like validate certain discussions where we don't think it would be healthy
Mhm.
for us to talk about. So um, that's the danger where I see when we talk about powerful companies and then people being involved in it. Would be a danger if it's treated like a sport that is super successful. But that's like I see holes in my arguments or my responses to that idea. But so I'm just saying that like if you treat it as a sport, like I'm just worried about like what motions would be fielded in terms of like, is it a healthy conversation? And we were also questioning that in terms of my team, where we knew it was going to be released on media platforms. uh so I just see that danger of that, where if I was getting paid to debate a certain topic, like I wouldn't be questioning it.
I get that. I think there's one thing I would say which I don't, like a lot of people disagree with. The other two things, just like technical with what you said. So accountability is on the rise of debating, and there are lots of gross things that we can do and we should be doing, which a lot of debaters and judges are not ready for. But like I'm building tournaments where this is going to happen. For example, no more single chair judging at rounds, and all panels have to have discussions, and all discussions have to be taped, and all those taped discussions have to go online so people could see what these judges did. And then these judges' results would be on a directory. So we could see how they score. And if they're a known score inflator, they would be called out for it. If they are known like to give bad scores to certain teams or certain geographical locations, they have a track record that follows them. And if you want to participate in tournaments that I'm going to host in the future, I hope that I can make that a requirement, right? Like basically, it's going to become a lot more objective because a lot of it's going to become a lot more transparent. And that thing about recording judge panel discussions and seeing how they behave and what they would do depending on who's debating or what the topic is, and creating that consistent track record, especially when we could record all of it on Zoom, right? A lot of bad judges or like, well, I don't think there are a lot of them left. I think a lot of them are getting weaned out by a system that's been able to call out, you know, toxic, corrupt people. But a lot of them who are still around, right? This system, especially with the accountability and the recordings, is going to wean out. The other thing about companies putting on controversial topics, I mean, we've both worked in China. There are ways where we can limit that discussion. And I think the natural incentive of a company would be not to alienate their viewer base. So I guess the future telling part of this is it's probably not going to get that bad because it's going to be bad for money if it ends up that you have them defend topics that are controversial. But the part that not a lot of people would agree with me on is debating used to be the space to have those uncomfortable conversations. And like, I think that if you're going to get hurt by it, we could have trigger warnings. But if debaters can't be the ones to talk about these sensitive issues, and the underlying argument is let your imagination judgment do it for you, right? We don't need to talk about it because it's not a healthy discussion. Well, that's great if I could trust everyone to have the same IQ as me, or someone who I could trust to have analysis of that issue. I say that to someone who has bad moral judgment. I say that to someone who has incomplete moral judgment because they're young. And we're not supposed to talk about it. I guess what they meant to have was this sort of, like, we don't know what's happening in their heads. I think that if anyone was going to have a discussion about it, it has to be a debater. And I think that if we're going to hurt some feelings along the way, and if we're going to have people defend bad positions, just remember that that's not the position that they believe in, but we're going to logically exhaust it. And if we're sure that one side should lose that, then let them lose. But that's not to say we shouldn't have a debate about it, because if we're not going to have a discussion about it, no one has a discussion about it, it goes undiscussed, and maybe the bad guys win because no one ever showed us why the bad guys are wrong, right? So I dangerous, like, I'm a Shang Wu Li fan. I'm a Dangerous Spaces debating fan. I think that we should have that, because if we're not going to do it, no one will.
So what are your thoughts about, like, there are things, like, we have claims in the debate community that there are things that are just not worth debating, or it's a bad motion, or it's like not debatable. Like, for example, like supporting dictatorial regimes, where like we have seen like Marcos apologists enter the Philippine debate circuit Facebook groups and saying, let's debate about like whether like this dictator was a good dictator, like, or like one of the best like leaders that we had in the country. And just like the collective stance of the circuit was that no, we don't want to debate those types of topics, because like we're just clear that it wasn't like political like imprisonment and killing people for their beliefs, and torture is just not something that is worth it, despite of like these infrastructure things and like certain projects and policies. So like what would be your take on that?
So much about that, right? First, like, you're not uniformly intelligent. Not every member of the PDU group on Facebook is as intelligent as each other. Some of them might know why Marcos was wrong. Some of them are only going to say Marcos was wrong because they're afraid people will judge them, right? Like, having that debate in public where you understand how to defend that position when you're with non-debaters, like your aunt or your annoying grandpa, or like your friend who's a Marcos apologist, like being able to articulate those comes from seeing better debaters better than you articulate it. So the debate still needs to happen.
I see.
I think PDU people should be more confident about themselves, right? Like, I think that what they're afraid of are a bunch of things like, will they lose a debate? Well, be happy to lose, right? Because if you're defending the wrong position, you do your best, you show the best version of the wrong argument, and you still lose, but you still did a good job, right? I think we should get over the winning or losing thing. But also, if they're worried that these people won't listen to them, this is the big thing I've been telling so many of my, Filipino friends like all the time, which is the Philippine left is failing because when met with idiots who are voting badly, they say, leave them alone. There's nothing we can do. Well, if you're not going to figure out what to do, who's going to figure out what to do to convince them? Because you're going to keep voting for the wrong people and you're going to keep complaining about it. Never mind, a lot of the Philippine left right now are privileged and elite. And because the Philippine left are privileged and elite, a lot of you didn't vote in the election because you don't want to go to a public school and line up in the heat and they have those dirty fingernails, right? Like a lot of you did, and I did. I voted. I didn't have to line up there because I did a postal vote. But the fact is, because of that inertia, right? Like if you're not going to do it, no one will. Like the Philippine left has to get down and dirty and figure out what it takes to change votes because people are dying and no one else is going to do it. It sucks.
Got it. My stance on that would be, in tournaments where there are championships and they're like more serious, I think the controversial stuff shouldn't be there. I think like I'd still lean towards like, let's have it more balanced. And like, I don't know, like one of the articles I read like back in college is that like there's an explanation why like the Philippine, like the debate circuit like in general runs towards like liberal values. But I agree with you in terms of like, we need to discuss these types of things. And I think the perfect platform for that would be like exhibition debates or like just like out of tournament debates where we can still talk about these things, because in reality, like for example, like our aunts or like our neighbors would still be carrying those like stances where we just like think that that's just the wrong stance. I think that those conversations should exist either in like podcasts or like in like exhibition debates. So yeah, like I see your point of view regarding that.
No, it's also like the annoying. So that's true, but the annoying thing that you have to eventually end up doing is you need to acknowledge whoever these people voted for. So if they're popular and they won elections, or if they're popular and they're the spokespersons of Duterte, you need to acknowledge your legitimacy as a result of that popular mandate and then debate with them. But they're not going to debate with you if the start of the conversation is dismissal of the platform because murderer and stuff. Like they should be dismissed, but they should be dismissed by you beating them in a debate, not by denying them a platform, allowing that Duterte bubble to incubate and get so much bigger because no one is engaging with them. Right? It's polarized. It's like the Philippines is a worse, impoverished, politically immature version of the US bicameral system, bipartisan system, but there are no two parties. It's just, there's no ideology. And I think that's because no one wants to legitimize each other. No one wants to say, I lost to that person because I didn't get enough votes and I'm not popular enough, and we'll see if I can get more votes in the next election, right? Like no one does that. And that's also in the debating community. That's also in our, legitimizing of forces that we don't agree with. I don't know how it's going to be fixed. I'm not claiming I do. I don't have a solution.
But like conversations within the community should exist.
Conversations with people outside the community so that we can crystallize this PDU or like this community of, like critical thinkers as a liberal, a social democratic force, if that's what we want it to be. But that requires that you understand that other forces out there. I know tons of people who are on the Duterte camp because I was in Lakas CMD in 2010. And a lot of them did go to college. A lot of them are articulate. They speak English. They went to good schools. You're not friends with them because they're insulated from the camp right now. But I'm sure a lot of them would be very happy to have debates with PDU people. And so, I mean, I'm uniquely there because I see both areas. Like, I'm not one of the people who have a Facebook bubble that's just the liberal left because accidentally, right? A lot of the guys that I was working with politically are now in that camp. Right? Like if people wanted to have a debate about it, they'd be happy to, because they still trust me because I was a spokesperson that kind of, I'm sure they'd be happy to say, yeah, Daryl says we're gonna have a debate. Let's have a real debate. But it can't be one where you just entrap them and yell at them. Right? Like there has to be a way where you could convince them to change their votes. Because if I could make them vote one way once, if I could convince them to vote one way, like in the past, I'm sure we could do it again. It's just a willing to join that process. I don't know how yet, but like, yeah. Like, I feel strongly about that.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that in terms of one book that I read from Think Like a Freak. And it's a chapter about like how to convince people who don't want to be convinced. And it's about letting them know that they are understood to the extent of their argument where it's credible. And once you get to acknowledge the strength of their argument, they are likelier to listen to why their argument is faulty. But without going towards the extent of, I understand the strength of your argument, they wouldn't be willing to acknowledge the weaknesses of their argument if we don't see the valid areas of where they speak. So I yeah, I totally get you, man. And I think I think we should promote like these controversial topics, like because like for example, like a debate motion saying that this house supports the current administration or the current government, the natural reaction, like for you and me, would say this is so unbalanced. Like Gov is gonna lose, and I don't want also to debate this motion because it's just like not like geared towards the values that I want to espouse, or like there's not a conversation that moves things forward. But I think talking about like your perspective, it's about if I get to defend that side, and I would then understand the people that I want to convince otherwise, that why we shouldn't support this administration or not. But even if like we don't get to convince them, I think the understanding of where they're coming from allows for more compassion or like healthier discussions. And I think that would be the value of debating about it, is just understanding the viewpoints of the people that we want to convince otherwise.
The value could be much deeper too, though. And I say that because you could also potentially change your mind. Anti-Duterte policies about extrajudicial killings, crackdown on the media. I think ABS-CBN should be out. But I'm also very anti-Corazon Aquino. I don't like the fact that the 1987 Constitution restricts foreign ownership of capital. I don't like the constriction of the economy so that minimum wage is so low because we can't take advantage of, investors from the US or like other countries. I don't like the fact that oligarchs have preserved, like companies from the Spanish era, and you don't break down monopolies because they were friends with Aquino. There's so many things I don't like about her. There's so many things I don't like about Duterte. And I guess it's not just about being, able to put out the point and not get changed, but at least we voice it out. It's also evaluating if we're wrong, because we could potentially also be the bad guy here. And do we have to wait until we're a super minority until we realize we need to change our own stances? Do we need to go anti-federalism, anti-parliamentary government just because Duterte is running it? Or can't we take things by policy? Can't I accept that, we need to keep holding the PNP and AFP accountable to abuses of violence and war, but at the same time agree that it might not be a useful discussion both for opposing the government and opposing his supporters, that we call the president names? Right? Like, what if I went up to a UPD debater and started making fun of them based on what they were wearing or their face, right? It's just, it's not just about voicing it out and hoping a Hegelic synthesis antithesis thing happens. It's also about finding out where we're wrong, because we're not angels here, and that's something that we need to start reflecting on.
Right. Actually, that's why I also value debate, is because there are many ways where we can understand that we're wrong, and we get used to the fact that people disagree with us, and disagreement is okay. And that's where we can evaluate, these things. And I also think that on the instance that we are right, assessing that if we're wrong can strengthen the defense or the discussion for the times that we are right, because we went to the depths of acknowledging that if we are wrong, what would be the valid viewpoints, and so I think benefits happen in two ways. Number one, if we're right, then that means it just gets strengthened and we know how to be more convincing of it. And if we're wrong, then that's where we can reassess and pivot certain ways to what is much healthier and what's just overall beneficial for the discussion of this issue.
We're wrapping up here, and I guess some professional advice for younger people watching this, people who want to apply for jobs, people graduating college. people who want to go on a date or like ask that guy out, right? Like one thing that a lot of people don't really have their identities wrapped around is the fact that no one wants to talk to somebody who doesn't have a stand on things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like no one wants to be dating or hiring the person who just is told what to believe in and then is worried that they would be seen as oppositional and therefore doesn't take a stand in
Mm-hmm.
something, right? Like people want to hire and date people with backbones. So don't be afraid to let people know what you really feel. If you're
Mm-hmm.
afraid you're going to get losses in debate tournaments because they're going to profile you as someone who didn't toe the line, then your debating circuit's the one that's broken, right? We cherish our individuality, our own stances, and we change them when we get convinced otherwise. But to silence your own brain because you're afraid you'd be judged for having the wrong opinion means you'll have fewer opinions, and then you become a worse debater. So
Yeah.
just be yourself, right? Just be
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
And if they don't like you for who you are, then they won't like you for who you really are, and they shouldn't
Right.
like you for someone.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
think
some young people
yeah, I think
figure out.
now just in terms of that, like in terms of implementing those discussion points, the devil is how it's going to be implemented. Like, would it be in tournaments? Would it be in different platforms? So that's a interesting discussion for the future, moving forward. I don't know, to wrap up, just in terms of um, where do we think um, debating in general could move forward? Like, in what areas could it move forward? And like, what are the certain action points that we advocate for? I'd be interested to know what would be steps moving forward towards like enriching the debate community.
I feel that the combination of online and offline tournaments after this coronavirus thing is going to end up with offline tournaments coming back to the mainstream, but then judges coming from all over the world. So if
Mm,
our issue in the Philippines is judging standards and, because our good judges
institutional
want to debate,
bias.
institutional bias, have a laptop in the middle of the classroom and then there are four teams and you get a good internet connection and a judge who's good at their judging, who don't know who you are, what institution you are, is going to be hearing you out. And I think that's going to objectively recognize debaters no matter what institution or how old they are, right? Like I think
Yeah.
that's accountability. The theme is accountability. Like getting rid of bad judges and corrupt judges, telling judges who have credentials but aren't good at it to go back to debating because they need to firm up their skills before they can render judgment, because they would be bad for young debaters who are learning the wrong things,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like accountability across the board, and not in an enmatizing way. Like we don't want to tell them, except for the corrupt ones and toxic ones, right? Like those ones we have to do something about. But if you're bad at it, but you could get better at it, it's just about recognizing where you are and making sure that like you're able to help others, like not make it worse, because it's like the blind leading the blind, right? Like that, avoiding that, I think,
Mm.
is what I want for the circuit moving forward.
Yeah, that is an interesting idea in terms of like having debates offline, but then like if there's a good mic, audio, stable internet access, and we get like the best judges around the world to just like judge that objectively. That's where like also like
Jedi Council.
mhm. Yeah, like that's where like wins would also be valid, because like one of the things that I just experienced in normal tournaments, right? It's like they only won because of clout. They only won because like this and that, but that would change the whole thing where there's a champion debater or like a uh, well decorated judge that could judge like Philippine tournaments. That would be such a game changer, and that would just like, I don't know, like give more like validity towards like who really won the round, or like I don't know. I just think it's really interesting, and I'm excited to see when
Yeah.
yeah, when that happens. Um, as for me, in terms of like you saying that like just be who you are and stuff. For me, like what the a step forward is people like debaters who are invested in the sport, right, or in this craft. I think a step forward would be people sharing their ideas their thoughts and teaching and releasing content online for free. Um, I have encountered many people saying that, like, yeah, I do want to do that. Like, I want to give it more access so that the younger people from my high school could learn debate. But they're saying that, well, I'm just not good enough. Like, I don't have these things. And for me, it's about people don't have to be good enough, whatever that means. It's about having a heart to share knowledge that you've gained. And I just think that doing this with your cell phone and saying, hey, what's up? This is what I learned in debate. Like one thing I learned is about structuring your speech by outlining your main points, 1, 2, 3. So like even if you're a beginner and you can do that and give access to like your son's neighbor who's in public school who also like debate, that would be like a step forward because you're just sharing more information. But even if like you suck at giving out these information, like the market will still decide whether they'll watch you or not, and that would give you feedback in terms of then how do I become better in terms of relaying information and just spreading talent or spreading these types of knowledge all around the world. So for me, that's a step forward. Normal people just sharing content and giving value because now it's just accessible and it's just easy. So that's for me. I'm not saying people should do it. I mean, like, but I think that would be a step forward towards enriching the debate.
Oh, you gotta practice, Bolo. Practice what we're discussing. Just say it. Yeah, people should do it.
Yeah.
You don't need to listen to it. I think people should do it.
Yeah. That's pretty much it for me. Any closing remarks for you, or how do we?
I think. Well, if people are watching this are they watching a video or listening to this on audio?
They're gonna be watching a video. This is just recorded, and then we'll just I'll just post it on Facebook or YouTube or whatever.
Or something, right? Is it?
Sorry.
It's not Spotify.
No.
Spotify.
No, I don't know how to do that yet. I'll learn it soon, but.
Well, like, thanks for having me, Bo. I think this was a great discussion, especially going into our tangents about business and politics in the Philippines. If you guys want to like get in touch with me or like get in touch with me about my projects in China, you could reach me. There's going to be some text here in the podcast, daryldebating@gmail.com. I'll be back. If you have any questions about what I've said or like want to hear my opinions about other things or details that, we didn't name out because like privacy issues, reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk to you guys about that.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for your generosity of your time. Like I have an impression of you that you're a busy man and you're doing a lot of things. And I just really want to thank you for being generous to share your perspectives and enriching the discussion of this topic. I hope we can do this again. I had a blast. I did not know that like we've been doing this for like above like an hour because I was just like having a blast. So let's do this again with other topics if you're free.
Maybe
awesome
too, so we could bounce some ideas too. All right, bye, Bolo.
Yeah, bye.